This week on BSD Now, we'll be discussing a wide variety of topics including routers, run controls, and the rule of silence. And hey, some Minecraft just for good measure. Stay tuned for your place to be, SD. BSD Now, episode 178, Enjoy the Silence, recorded January 25th, 2017. Hey, I'm your host, Chris Moore.
And I'm Alan Jude.
Glad to have you with us this week. So that was a little Depeche Mode reference there, Alan. I don't know if you're a fan or not. Got this song, but anyway, somebody out there got it. So anyway, well, we got some news to get to, and yes, there's going to be an article about how silence is golden. So you'll have to wait for that. That looks interesting. Alan's going to tell us about it. But first, our first headline this week, we need to talk a little bit about ports and specifically how it relates to end-of-life FreeBSD versions. So what have they done here? So which ones have they yanked out from under us?
Well, not really from under us. So the versions that are end of life. So up until a week ago or so, the port tree contained a bunch of backwards compatibility code to deal with the fact that people still running FreeBSD 10.1, didn't have certain things built into the base system, and so the port tree had to shim and make sure they had all the right stuff, or do things slightly differently on those to deal with the fact that certain things were missing. Now that 9.3, 10.1, and 10.2 are no longer supported, they've passed their end of life. People have had warnings for a very long time that they need to upgrade to 10.3 or 11.0. They can now pull all that backwards compatibility cruft out of the ports tree, making it that much easier for them to, maintain things. But also, it allows them to start upgrading things, like we'll see coming up next week. There'll be new Xorg, support for Wayland, and all this other stuff that we couldn't have because we were still dragging around these old supported versions like 10.1 and 10.2. So with the removal of all versions of 9 and support for 10.0, 10.1, and 10.2, we now can have shiny new things.
Yay. Which is important. You got to have the shiny new things.
But this means that if you are running FreeBSD 10.1 or 10.2 and you grab the latest ports tree and try to build something, it will say, sorry, no. Now, there is an environment variable you can set to override it, allow unsupported system, but there's a good chance a bunch of stuff is going to break. So,
Well, yeah, because now porters don't have to go back and say, okay, does it work on this weird version of 9, which nobody, we don't support anymore, or 10.1 or whatever.
Yes, because one of the other commits they did was remove the, this only builds on FreeBSD 10 and later from the entire ports tree because there is no 9 and earlier anymore. This is part of the reason that FreeBSD projects changed its release scheme with FreeBSD 11 so that when 11.1 comes out, 11.0 will expire 3 months later. Instead of having a fixed date when we release 11.0 saying, well, we support it for a year, and then we do 11.1 and that'll be 2 years, and 11.2 1 year again. Because that really left us in this position with 10.1 and 10.2 where we're dragging those along for a long time and trying to and basically being held back from upgrading the ports tree to offer newer versions of Xorg because they can't work with the drivers that are in the older version of FreeBSD. Yeah. So the new system where you still get the same 5 years of 11.x, but as soon as 11.1 comes out, you have 3 months, a 3-month countdown starts, and you have to, get upgraded right away.
This is a very much needed change, right? There's, again, like you said, some things are gated by it, Xorg being one of them. And I know it's just a lot of work to try and test against all those older versions too, especially for the ports maintainers. People, will try it against head or try it against stable and then, I'll try it on the latest release. And then at that point, most people won't even do that, let's be honest. I just do mine against head.
Yeah.
It's a lot to have to go back and then test to see which ones it still builds on and works on.
Yeah, because back in December, you literally had to test 9.3, 10.1, 10.2, 10.3, and 11. And now you just have to test 10.3 and 11.
Yeah, heck of a lot easier. Yeah. Oh, that's good.
There's a separate but related thing. If you're using the precompiled packages, you also run into a problem, although slightly different. So if you're using PKG, then this also runs into the problem with old releases. So packages are always built on the oldest supported release on a branch. So that meant in December that packages for FreeBSD 10.1, 10.2, and 10.3 were all built on 10.1 because that's the oldest supported version. And that's done because that's the most... FreeBSD is always future-proof. So if you build on an old version, it'll keep working newer. But when you build on a new version, it doesn't necessarily go backwards because there are new features. So they always build on 10.1 because that's the only way to guarantee it'll work on 10.1, 10.2, and 10.3. Now that those are no longer supported, they build all the 10 packages on 10.3. Now, 10.3 includes a bunch of new features, including all the functions like open and link and so on. And so package itself and all the packages are built with these new libc functions, that are used by Capsicum and everywhere else. Like basically, open is just a wrapper around open@, now. And this allows, this is part of POSIX now, and it's how Capsicum works. So now package and all the packages you build are built on 10.3. So if you try to install them on 10.2, almost immediately package will exit with an error as soon as it tries to open a file saying, undefined symbol open@. So you can work around that temporarily by using package-static to at least get the package command fixed. But obviously the programs you install are going to be broken. You need to upgrade. I had to do it recently because I ran into the same problem.
And this actually is what prompted, I think when this went into head a while back, that's what prompted us to use package static for everything with our upgrade manager, because I think we got bit by this once.
Yeah.
But
I've seen
that'll fix it for PKG, but you still need to just upgrade to just avoid the pain.
I've run into that with the version of OpenSSL as well. Or in particular, I've run into, when I do my own Poudre builds, I was using the latest version in my build jail. Which meant that my slightly older versions that would work off the packages I built there would mostly work, but then randomly explode. But yes, the important thing here is that with FreeBSD, if you're on 11 something, upgrading to 11 something plus a bit is always an easy process, right? Because everything is forward compatible like that, it means that you don't have to reinstall anything or recompile anything. Just upgrading from 11.0 to 11.1 will be seamless and easy and safe. So if you're on 10.1 or 10.2, you can just go to 10.3 and not have to rebuild anything. All the binaries will work, even like binary kernel drivers that you maybe get as a binary from a company and they don't provide the source code for you to build a new one for 10.3. Those will continue to work. It won't work with 11, but if you get the binary Adaptec driver or something for a array controller that says 10.1, it'll still work on 10.3 and everything will be fine. So yes, that's why the new release mechanism is trying to get people to stay up current, because it's safe to do so, and it's the only way that we can deal with the maintenance burden. I think we'd be a little further ahead if we hadn't had to drag 10.1 and 10.2 along with us for so long, or even 9.3, honestly.
That's right. Well, yeah, it's definitely a good model, and it's going to make things a lot better going forward, but it just means you need to do a little bit more work ahead of time. Just make sure you stay up to date. Run that FreeBSD update command. It should be pretty painless, and one reboot and you're back in business. Okay, so let's see. Next up here we have improving TrueOS, OpenRC. So with, of course, TrueOS moving to a rolling release model, we've decided to try and be a little bit more proactive in sharing news about new features that are landing. And this week we posted an article talking about some of the transition to OpenRC, which is up on our blog. And in past episodes, first of all, you've heard me mention OpenRC. So hopefully today we can help answer some of those lingering questions you may still have about it. But for those maybe who don't know, one question we always get asked is, what is OpenRC exactly? So basically from the blog post here, OpenRC is a dependency-based init system working with the system-provided init program, so it doesn't necessarily replace init. It's used with several Linux distributions, including Gentoo and Alpine Linux. However, OpenBSD was created by a NetBSD developer, Roy Marples, in one of those interesting intersections of Linux and BSD development. OpenRC's development history, portability, and two-clause BSD license made its integration into TrueOS actually a pretty easy decision. So that's just a little bit of the background of where it came from and some of its pedigree there. But now that we know about where it came from, how does it actually behave differently than traditional RC? So if you're a traditional FreeBSD guy, what's going to change on you? So it says TrueOS now uses OpenRC to manage all the system services as opposed to FreeBSD's RC. So instead of using rc.d for base system RC scripts, OpenRC uses init.d. Also, every service in OpenRC has its own user configuration file, which can be located in etcconf.d for the base system and user local etcconf.d for ports. So those are, I'll just caveat there, those are, you can use those. It's not required, though. You can still put your knobs in etcrc.conf, and those will continue to work just as they did before. Finally, also, OpenRC uses run levels as opposed to the FreeBSD single or multi-user mode. So you can view the services and their run levels by typing in the RC update command in the CLI. And TrueOS also integrates OpenRC's service management into the system tool with System Manager. So you can very quickly see all your services, see their status. Are they running, stopped, crashed, whatever. Like it tracks all that.
Yeah, it looks a lot like the Windows Service Manager, honestly.
It actually does. Like, and maybe that was by design just a little bit. So it's familiar to people, right? Makes it easy. But one of the prime benefits from OpenRC that we really wanted to take advantage of was the much faster boot times, which is really important in a portable world of laptops and desktops as well. But especially when we don't have on a lot of systems working suspend and resume, the fact that I can get to a login and doing stuff within 15 seconds, whereas before maybe it was a minute, that's pretty significant, right? Makes powering up the laptop a lot less painful. But also it has the service monitoring and crash detection, which is also important parts of what make OpenRC a substantial upgrade for TrueOS. So it is pretty nice to be able to see when something goes sideways, it just doesn't disappear. OpenRC actually flags it as crashed, and then you can take the appropriate action. So one of the last things people have been asking us about migration is what is done, what isn't. So as of now, almost all the FreeBSD base system services have been migrated over. I think about 90%, maybe a little more than that, are all done. So things like NIST got put in a couple weeks ago. That's all like the YP services and stuff in RC.D. In addition, most of the desktop-facing services required to run Lumina and the like are all supported. So, dbus. Oh gosh, trying to remember all the different things we use now. We don't use HAL anymore, but definitely dbus was one of them. sysadm services relating to the desktop, all those have been ported over to OpenRC. So if your desktop experience should be pretty much identical. We're still now, the thing that's taking the longest, though, is we're still going through the port tree and converting legacy rc.d scripts to init.d, but the process takes time. So we've actually had several new contributors who've stepped up and are starting to send a lot of pull requests in, converting the things to OpenRC scripts. And we hope to have all the roughly 1,000 of them converted over this year. So there's roughly 1,000 ports in the ports tree, which ship some sort of rc.d script. And we're just going through and flipping them over. It's actually not that painful, believe it or not. If you have some passing familiarity with rc.d scripts, converting it to OpenRC's just a couple lines usually. You can just bring in the old script, change the shebang up at the top to sbin openrc-run as opposed to bin sh. And then there's a great man page for that as well, which describes all the things you can do in OpenRC. So you can go through and tweak it. Like you can get really crazy on services if you want and do some really fancy stuff. But for just bringing it over from rc.d, usually it's a matter of just changing the shebang, updating a couple of the variable names, and renaming a couple functions depending on how complex it is if you need to do that. Like OpenRC already has concepts of like pre and post, or things that run pre and post, like init or startup and different phases and stuff. And it supports a lot of the same things like extra commands and whatnot that rc.d already did. So again, pretty painless to do, and we're hoping to try and get through them all this next year. It's just a slog. There's a lot of them to do, so we're doing them kind of on a first come first serve basis. The high demand ones get done, so things like OpenVPN got done really early on because I use that. VirtualBox, VirtualBox got done. Nginx's, your Apaches, your databases, Postgres, MySQL, those kind of things are all pretty much taken care of. But there's going to be a lot of little less popular ones that we still have to port over. So anyway, we're hoping to have those all done later this year. And at that point, everything will now be OpenRC'd and can be managed via that mechanism. So that's kind of a rough status update of where we're at with it. And hopefully that'll get some people cracking on it, and keep sending those pull requests in, because we want to finish getting everything converted over as soon as possible. Okay, well, it's time for our first sponsor this week, which we're going to be starting with IX Systems. So the website for that ixsystems.com/BSD Now, where you'll want to go there, get signed up. There's a little form you fill out, put in your contact info, and that'll get you in touch with one of our sales engineers. Now, what's really cool about the IX System sales engineers is they speak the lingo. They're like you. It's really cool because you can tell them things like, okay, we're going to be using CARP, or we're going to be doing ZFS with this type of RAID setup, or, we want to do a database with block size set to this and so forth and so on. Like, you can go into really good detail with these guys. And they understand that, and they want that. And matter of fact, when you tell them you heard about it here, that's what kind of gives them the clue, like, oh, this guy's smarter than the average bear. We should probably ask him more about what they're doing with the box so that they can help design the box properly to meet whatever needs you have. So maybe this ZIL makes more sense than this other ZIL here. Or you want these type of disks, or you know what, you should spend a little bit more on the CPU power, and maybe the memory is not as important to your workload. Like they'll help you figure all those things out so that you can make sure your dollars are being spent very effectively and will get you the absolute best bang for your buck.
Yeah, like when you actually want an E5 1650 versus a 2650, it's like, well, you get a lot more cores with that one, but this one's got higher CPU speed. Now, if your workload can be spread across multiple CPUs, fine, then it works quite well to have a higher number of slower CPUs. But if you're, say, doing network routing or something where single-threaded performance is really important, having the one with the higher clock speed might be better. And rather than having to figure that all out yourself, it just, I remember the first time I tried to build a ZFS server and I didn't know about IX yet. I ended up buying a RAID controller when I shouldn't have, even though I wasn't going to use it for RAID. And it said on the box, supports FreeBSD, but it supported FreeBSD 8, and I wanted to use 9, although it was still 9.0 pre-release at the time, because that had ZFS v28 instead of some older version or something like that. Had much newer version of ZFS, and I really wanted that. But then the driver wouldn't work, and I had all these problems. And even once I got it working, sometimes the driver for it would just like go away and come back, and all these mistakes I ended up making, and all the headaches I had. Is like I bought the machine, and then this didn't work, and that didn't work, and then the next storage set I bought, I went to IX, ordered it, and then it's like, oh yeah, we got this, and this is all. It showed up, and it just worked. I was like, wow, so much less headache.
Right.
And
it just makes the process so much nicer.
It was just so much nicer, and it didn't cost anything extra. Like this literally would have cost me more to build it from scratch, which I found amazing. But
it really boils down to the culture of the company, right? I think we breed that kind of that geekified BSD Linux Unix air, right? Where it's like that's the stuff they understand, that's the lingo they speak, and that's everyone. That's the support people, that's the sales people, that's the marketing people. I mean, we all have that pedigree in one form or another. So definitely when you get in touch with IX, you're going to get a little bit different experience than you're going to get anywhere else. So definitely get in touch with them for your next project, whether it be storage, cloud, you need a rack of things. You need a little FreeNAS Mini to go under your desk. Like they can do all those things and everything in between. So definitely get in touch with them and tell them you heard about it here on BSD Now. Because again, that's kind of the secret that clues them in that, hey, these guys, we can really talk some shop now. Okay, so tell us about what's going on. I guess we got a new BSD router project release that's come out. What have they sprung on us this time? What cool new stuff?
Yep. So the BSD router project has released version 1.70.
Okay.
And it's got quite a few new things. Obviously, the first thing is, to describe what the BSD router project is for people that don't know, it's a distro of FreeBSD designed to replace high-end routers, so like a Cisco or a Juniper. So it's kind of different than a pfSense, which is usually for your small home or home office type setup. This is for bigger enterprise networks or even like ISP style networks. So to replace, it's like you would use like a 2U server rather than, something like one of those little boxes that we've seen where they laser etch the BSD stuff. Anyway, so the highlights are they've upgraded to FreeBSD 11 stable. In particular, there's some recent improvements that went into the stable branch that increase the forwarding, networking, routing performance in FreeBSD after 11.0. So they have those already integrated. We showed graphs of those a couple of weeks ago where he tested them and found that after that recent change with the new FIB4 API, that it was much higher performance. They've re-added the NetMap forward code that was added previously but had some problems and was backed out, but now it's in there for good. They've added the FibSync patch for NetMap forward, which allows it to sync the forward information table, basically the routing table with NetMap forward.
Sure.
The NetMap packet gen tool, which is a benchmarking tool that allows you to basically send packets really, really fast, finally has support for IPv6, thanks to Andrei Ulsukov, or AE at freebsd.org. I know that was a project I looked at trying to do previously, but I quickly went over my skill level and gave up on that.
Sure.
But they've also updated the version of Bird, which is the BGP routing daemon they're using, because the new version has support for BGP large communities, which is a new thing that's becoming popular. And they've also upgraded the version of OpenVPN included to be 2.4.0, which adds support for the high-speed AES GCM cipher, which is instead of having to have an encryption and then a verification step, it can do both of those at once, and it's really fast that way. And as you can, if you read the release notes I linked here, they've upgraded all the other things like iPerf, IPMI tool, the DHCP server, the routing stuff, Quagga, StrongSwan for IPsec, lots of other stuff. But yeah, their latest release looks really good. And what's been interesting is just, a lot of great work's gone into the BSD router project itself, but it's also generated a lot of great benchmarks that have helped us test and improve the performance and increase our understanding of how FreeBSD actually performs as it scales across different CPUs and speeds and so on. Part of this work has allowed it to compare what the performance is on like a 4-core Xeon at 2-point-something gigahertz versus a 6-core Xeon at some other value, and a 32-core Xeon at this other value, and how that actually impacts the performance for forwarding and the scaling.
That's pretty nice.
Yeah.
That's one of those projects I need to, I don't know, have you actually tried it yet, Alan? I need to find an excuse to run it.
So when I got some new hardware, the 32-core machine, actually, I coordinated with Olivier that runs this project to actually let him install it on my two machines and run a set of benchmarks on these machines before I started using them. So outside of that, I've not actually used this either. But
yeah, it's one of those things. Every time I see it, I'm like, that's really neat. I need to be running that here somewhere because we have a couple switches. It would be nice to swap out, right?
Yeah, I don't really have any routing needs that are quite that big at the moment.
That is pretty cool.
But we're moving towards it, so I might have to have IX build me a couple of machines to run this on for my routers.
That would be really nice. Okay. So next up here, we get some Dragonfly news. So we have a commit here up on their website that adds support for UEFI to the Dragonfly installer, which of course will allow your system to boot from UEFI. So it looks like we have a link here also to the script, which provides a way for you to build a Hammer file system that works with UEFI, which is pretty cool. And then we have some links to man pages here and an install media they've updated, which now gives you the option to choose between the two.
Yeah, so the install media, the install media can boot UEFI, which is also some. If your machine only boots UEFI, then you kind of need that to do an install. Although one of the bigger reasons, most systems will still boot BIOS, but if you have one of those NVMe devices that's in your laptop or whatever, or desktop that's really, really high speed, you really want to boot off of it because that makes booting faster, but there's only support UEFI because they don't emulate BIOS.
Yeah.
One caveat.
That's kind of the forcing factor for a lot of people at this point. As soon as you get that shiny new NVMe, it's like, oh, and now I need UEFI. Yeah. Now I get it.
Yeah. One caveat right now is that the installer only supports doing a full disk install. So it'll, wipe out the whole disk and splat down this to be able to create the UEFI partition and so on. It doesn't yet support, adding it as an extra thing onto an existing EFI partition so that you could, easily use the installer to create a multi-boot. But that makes sense. For first step, this gets it working.
Yeah, that's perfect. And I imagine they'll get that support at some point too. Exactly. But gotta take that first step, make it just kind of work at all. So that's good stuff. So now it's time to head over to the news roundup here. So we have our first story, the rule of silence, which kind of inspired the title of this week's episode. So tell us what exactly this means as it relates to development and programming, Alan. This is actually the first time I'd heard of this rule.
Yeah. So the rule of silence, which is also referred to the silence is golden rule, is an important part of the Unix philosophy that states when a program has nothing surprising, interesting, or useful to say, it should say nothing. It means that a well-behaved program should treat the user's attention and concentration as being valuable and thus perform their task as unobtrusively as possible. That is, silence in itself is a virtue.
Makes sense.
Right? You kind of notice this with a lot of programs. You do something, and as long as nothing goes wrong, there could be just zero output at all.
That means like DD is the best program ever.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, it does have the output at the end.
Sure.
Which, it has there's a way to turn it off. It's like, like something equals no status or something like that. But, maybe really it should be the other way around, where it only prints that message if you ask for it. But
right.
It prints it to standard error, so it's not so bad. But,
Sure.
So that doesn't mean that a program cannot be verbose. It just means that you should have to ask it to be. So yes, maybe actually DD should suppress that message by default.
That's right.
That'd be pretty surprising for people.
We'll have to go through and silence all the things now.
He says, there is no single standardized statement of the Unix philosophy, but perhaps the simplest description would be, write programs that are small, simple, and transparent. Write them so that they do one thing and do it well and can work together with other programs. That is, the philosophy centers around the concept of smallness, simplicity, modularity, craftsmanship, transparency, economy, diversity, portability, flexibility, and extensibility. Just a lot of words, but yes, that's the entire idea. This philosophy has been fundamental to the fact that Unix-like operating systems have been thriving for more than 3 decades, far longer than any other family of operating systems, and can be expected to see continued expansion in use as the years to come. The rule of science is one of the oldest and most persistent design rules for such operating systems. It's intuitive, or as intuitive as this rule might seem to experienced users of such a system, it is frequently ignored by the developers of other types of operating systems and applications and the programs that you use on them, which often results in distraction, annoyance, and frustration for the user. Like, how many times does a program give you some information and you're like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that. Yeah. Is that a problem or is it just extraneous? There are several very good reasons for the rule of silence. Number 1 is to avoid cluttering the user's mind with information that might not be necessary or might not even be desired. If I didn't want to know that, then why are you wasting my time?
True.
That is, the unnecessary information can be a distraction. Moreover, unnecessary messages generated by some operating systems and application programs are sometimes poorly worded and can cause confusion or needless worry on the part of the user. Right? If you don't know what the message means or what you're supposed to do with that information because you weren't expecting it, then it can be very confusing. Now, admittedly, sometimes I noticed this when I was trying to teach Unix. Oftentimes, somebody would try something that wouldn't work, but they were so used to ignoring the output that they didn't read the error message that very clearly explained why it didn't work.
Sure.
Although sometimes the error messages are not as clear as they should be. In particular...
Or they're buried in all the other messages,
yes,
right?
Exactly.
Like, that's why actually it's 6 lines up. Here's the error.
Yeah, economy of output is important there. But the bigger thing there is like in ZFS, when you try to create a pool and you try to mix VDEV types or you accidentally try to add a single disk to a pool instead of attaching it to an existing disk to create a mirror, it gives an error saying, hey, that's an invalid VDEV specification. But if you put -F, we'll put it in anyway. And quite a few users have just been like, okay, put in -F and done it, and ended up doing something they really, really didn't want to do.
Sure.
Because the error message didn't explain why that would be a really bad idea. So maybe sometimes the error messages aren't as clear as they should be, but like you said,
or
the important thing,
enough.
but the important thing is to make sure that you're not putting out too much information so that the error message can easily be picked out of the list. The third reason is that command line programs, especially all text mode applications, and Unix-like operating systems are designed to work together with pipes. The output from one program then becomes input for this other program. This is a major feature, right? Pipes are hugely important. And it accounts for much of the power and flexibility. The ability to have all these little programs that do their one thing and can be chained together to do something totally different is half the point of Unix.
Sure.
But consequently, it's important to have only the truly important information included in the output of each program, and thus because that becomes the input of the next program.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, this happened in a conversation on Twitter just yesterday about if the usage message for a program should be printed to standard output or standard error. Half programs do it one way, and half programs do it the other way.
Yeah, what is the correct way on that?
It's not the output of the program, so it should be going to the error channel. Right?
Yeah. I guess, yeah. That makes sense.
But then it's like, I was like, well, that's annoyed me a couple times where I've wanted to grep the usage message for certain information.
Because there's been times I wanted to dump it too, just redirect. Oh, it's coming out of standard error.
Yeah. Well, in Bourne shell, that's easy enough. Although in TCSH, redirecting standard error, I've never learned the magic incantation other than start Bourne shell and then do it and then exit back to my TCSH.
How'd you know that's what I was doing too, Alan?
I did learn a while back how to do the for loops in TCSH, but I still do it in SH. Because scripting should be done in TCSH. But anyway.
Yes.
They brought up, and then David Maxwell from NetBSD brought up the point that the usage message shouldn't be so long that you need to grep through it. It really should never be more than a screenful. If it is, you're giving too much information at once.
True.
Apparently, David's never tried to use FFmpeg.
That's
8 or 10 pages of usage information.
Oh, man.
And that's not all of it. You have to ask for specific bits to go beyond that. But yeah. Anyway. The rule of silence originally applied to command line programs because all programs were originally created as command line programs. However, it is just as applicable to graphical user interface programs. That is, unnecessary and annoying information should be avoided regardless of the type of user interface. Right? An example of this is the useless and annoying dialog boxes, the small windows that pop up on the screen and sometimes with an alarming frequency.
I'm starting the task now. The task is happening. The task is almost done. And now it's done.
Well, is that TrueOS has quotes that pop up. I guess those are not what I'm thinking of. They used to have the first time you logged in, there was a thing that a start of a tutorial or something.
Yeah, there was it wasn't a wizard, it was a welcome screen, right? Where you could hit next and it would give you tips on how to use the system and stuff. Yeah. Haven't had that in a while.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I didn't remember seeing it lately, but yeah, anyway.
Yeah.
But these dialog boxes sometimes can contain either obvious information, which means I didn't need to know it, I already knew it, or cryptic or unnecessary messages, meaning I can't understand it or I don't know why I would care. And require the user to click them in order to close them and then proceed with their work, especially when it's a modal dialog box that doesn't allow the program to continue while you're trying to do it.
Right. I like modal dialog boxes. They're like that whiny little kid. It's like, no, I will demand your attention and I will be taken seriously. I'm not getting out of your face until you give me the attention I deserve.
Yes, I remember learning to use that flag in Visual Basic to make the box modal. So if you try to click away, it's like, ding, no, you must answer this box first.
That's right.
This is an interruption of concentration and a waste of time for most users. Such dialog boxes should be employed only in situations in which some truly unexpected result might occur or to protect important data.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and some of the other stuff maybe should go and just be like background notifications or something.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, then the article goes on to make an analogy about PA systems. I don't know if you've ever been in an airport or train station or something like that. If they have too many messages, especially if they're advertising and other unnecessary stuff that you really don't want to listen to, then you start to tune them out. And then you might not hear the important announcement. Whereas if they save the PA system for important announcements only, maybe they'll be useful.
That makes sense. See, it's kind of like what they've done with tornado alerts down here. Every time a tree starts to slightly sway in the wind, tornado warning. And after a while, it gets to be too much where you ignore them. I know we shouldn't, but it's true.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they found that sweet spot where I live yet.
Yeah, it's almost like your warning size you need people set is only warn me when the probability gets this high or something.
Yes,
It's
exactly.
like,
Or the tornado's been spotted and it's 10 miles from your
well, then
house.
it's a
Like,
little
that's
too
what I want to
late,
hear.
probably.
Depends on how fast it's
Yeah.
moving. Maybe I can get to the basement. But you know what I mean.
But yeah,
Like, I don't want to hear about something that's happening 100 miles away.
yeah. And,
Just me.
the same thing goes with the earthquake prediction stuff in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it's only useful if the false positive number is really low.
True. Okay, well, next up we have the Tao of Tmux. So, an interesting article floated across my news feed a few weeks back.
Well, this
And
is
what's
like a
essentially
whole book.
what was that? Yeah, I know. It's essentially a book, right? But it's called the Tao of Tmux, which immediately piqued my interest. So, first of all, a little background. My story may actually be similar to many of yours. I was initially raised on using Screen and Screen alone for all my terminal sessions and multiplexing needs. I mean, and even to this day, like that's just the muscle memory, right? But since then, I've only had kind of passing interest in Tmux. It's always been one of those utilities I felt was worthy of investing some time into, especially when I go to a BSD conference and I see some coworkers or somebody using it, and I'm like, oh, that's a really neat thing you did. I should learn how to do that. That looks cool. But needless to say, when this floated across my news feed, had to immediately bookmark the article so I can do some digging into it because, like Alan said, this is like a book. This is huge. But I thought this would be good to share with anybody else who's found themselves in a similar situation. Maybe you're a screen guru, but on the other hand, Tmux has just enough where you're getting curious. Like, maybe I want to switch over and see what I can do on that side of the wall. But the book starts off really well, though. Explains in some of the simplest terms possible what Tmux really is by comparing and contrasting it with something we're all familiar with, which, of course, is GUIs. And helpfully, they also include a chart which explains some of the terms we'll be using frequently when discussing Tmux. I don't know if you can show that on the screen here, Alan. I had a link for that. Let me just bring it up so I can go over it. So what I really liked was they give you some of the terms, right, and how that relates to things maybe you're more familiar with. So with Tmux, when we use the term multiplexer, in desktop speak, what we're really saying is multitasking, right? Or plain English, multiple actions simultaneously. In Tmux, when we say session, desktop speak, we would say desktop. That's where your applications are visible. So in Tmux, when we say window, in desktop, we're thinking virtual desktop, right? Or a desktop that stores its own screen. In Tmux, when we say pane, in desktop speak, we're actually talking about an application and where operations take place. So it's really neat that they threw out some of the terms right ahead of time so you kind of have a little frame of reference, which is pretty cool. Okay, now we move back over to the show notes here. So one of the things that the author does recommend, though, is also making sure you're up to speed on your terminal knowledge before you read this. So you need to read a book before you read the book. But let me just quote from the article here. Before getting into Tmux, a few fundamentals of the command line should be reviewed. Often we're so used to these out of the street smarts and muscle memory, and make a great deal of us never see the relation of where these tools stand next to one another. So in other words, we're just used to using them, but we don't really have all the pieces connected as to why that is. He says, seasoned developers are familiar with, of course, ZSH, Bash, iTerm, Console, DevTTY, shell scripting, and so on. If you use Tmux, you're around these all the time, regardless of whether you're in a GUI on a local machine or SSHing into a remote server. If you want to learn more about the process and how TTYs work at a kernel level, data structures and all, the book, The Design and Implementation of the FreeBSD Operating System, 2nd edition, by Marshall Kirk McCusick is nice. In particular, Chapter 4 on process management and Section 8.6 on terminal handling. And then he also recommends the TTY Demystified by Linus Atkinson, available online, also dives into the TTY and is a good read as well. So first of all, we had to get that little shout out of Kirk's book in there, which is really cool. So that was neat to see in the article. But from here, the book/article takes us on a whirlwind journey of sessions, windows, panes, and more. Every little control, X command that you could possibly use is covered. All the ones that maybe even if you are a Tmux user, I didn't know that was a shortcut and I could do that. Information on how to customize your status bar, tips and tricks, the whole, everything's here. I actually should have looked at how many pages it is. I didn't even scroll down.
Well, there's quite a few chapters anyway.
Yeah, there's many chapters, so it is a pretty large deal here. But there's far more than we're going to be able to cover here in a single segment. But we did want to pass this along, and you are highly encouraged to bookmark this one and start your own adventure into the world of Tmux. I'm actually still going through it right now and still trying to break free of that muscle memory where I just type screen automatically on a system. I need to switch it over to Tmux. Yeah. Now, which side do you fall on that?
I'm still on the screen side. Really need to get moving over to the Tmux side. The fact that all the commands are Control B instead of Control A has screwed me a little bit.
So when I tried using it a couple years ago, that was the first thing I did. Was the first guide I saw said, this is how you change the mapping to Control A. So if you're coming from screen, it's very familiar. Maybe this book covers that too. I haven't gotten to that section yet if he does. But I know that was one of the early tips somebody showed me, like just change it to Control A. Yep. It'll just make your life easier so you can get switched over.
In particular, watch it with screen. There's root escalation exploit going around for screen this week.
Oh.
Basically, you can specify any file you want as the log file for your screen session. Mm-hmm. So if you start a screen session, you're running as a regular user, but screen runs setuid root so that it can log your login and allow sharing across users and stuff. And I think it's also required for PAM, although it's not used by default on BSD. Basically, because it can log to anywhere, you could set your log file to say, some file like user local etc sudoers.d/something.
Sure.
And then just have the output of your screen session be like echo the stuff or whatever, and it will, or so you create a new sudoers file in your home directory, and then you run screen log to the real sudoers file, the command or the output of cat the fake sudoers file, and now you've just overwritten it and sudo win. Many other things.
That's
like
not good.
Yeah. I don't know if somebody's actually reproduced it on. I don't know that anybody's actually tried it on FreeBSD, but anyway, you want to watch out with screen and watch the port tree or the package audit for upgrades for that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've definitely got, like I said, Tmux is on my list. 2017, I think, is going to be the year I finally just got to switch over and start using it for everything. But definitely a lot of cool new features. I like all the window splitting and the different how you can set up the different panes in the windows. It looks really cool.
Yeah,
so I just need to force myself to do it.
I've never had that much need to want to try to make the screen smaller.
Right. No, I run in a lot of times I'm using a desktop just so I can have a big terminal, if I'm honest. Right. So yeah, I could have a full size terminal and be able to have VI running here and some other code here like that. That looks appealing to me. I got to say, I'm in enough files at once that would be really helpful. So anyway, encourage everybody to check it out. This is quite a good one. You'll have to devote some time to reading this, though. This is not a read really quick on your cell phone type book. You need to sit down and actually play with it. Okay, now we need to go to our second sponsor this week, which is going to be DigitalOcean. Website for that, digitalocean.com. You'll want to go there, get signed up, create an account, and then, of course, after you create that account, use the coupon code FreeBSDNow. So that's all one word, FreeBSDNow. And what that'll do is, first of all, it lets them know that you heard about it here, but it also gives you a $10 credit, which is good for running 2 months of their lowest end VM, or if you want to run things hourly and pay for it that way, you can spread that out really long as well. I think we have a question or some feedback somebody gave about a DigitalOcean trick as well, so we'll get to that later on in the show. But what's cool about DigitalOcean, of course, is everything can be done programmatically. They got a nice API, and they support FreeBSD natively. Yes. So they have FreeBSD on UFS, FreeBSD on ZFS, so you can kind of just pick the VM size that makes sense depending on which one you're going to use. Probably want a little more memory if you're going to do the ZFS.
Yep. And they actually have some new high memory instances. So normally their pricing works that, double the price and you get double everything. But sometimes you want more RAM and not so much CPU. And so they have a new set of pricing tiers for that to let you get more RAM without having to spend as much money. And also, speaking of the API, they announced just recently that they're introducing a new load balancing feature that you can use via the control panel or via the API. So no ops type stuff needed. And that's coming into beta soon. So if you go to their website and enter your email address for this, they will let you know. And you might get invited to the early beta of the load balancing feature. So if you want to use,
really nice.
If you most of the time only need one droplet to do your load, but maybe there's a peak thing going to be coming up and you want to load balance across a couple of droplets, or say spin up a couple of extra droplets only for a couple hours and pay the hourly rate. And then once the traffic surge is over, they can be shut down and you only had to pay a couple of cents to deal with that. Then you should definitely check that out.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right. Well, that's really cool. And of course, we've mentioned it on the past episodes of the show, but you can load OpenBSD, Net, Dragonfly in their droplets as well. And there's all kinds of instructions floating around the internet on how to do that. Just Google it and you should be in business. But definitely check them out today. Locations all around the world. So if you want something close, great. You want something far away, great. You want some combination, you can set that all up. And their website makes it super simple to do. And of course, if you're a programmatic guy and you want to just script this all, grab their API.
Yeah,
don't forget to reference
when
that.
you need to create 40 droplets very quickly, the API is very nice.
That is true.
Although their web interface makes it easy to create a whole bunch of them very quickly as well. It actually automatically figures out your numbering scheme if it's sane as well, which we found very helpful compared to other places we tried where they just added the number to the end of the host name. It's like blah, blah, blah.scaleng.net 3 doesn't really work as a host name.
True. Okay, so our next story here, the SDF celebrates 30 years of service in 2017. So tell us what's going on with that, Alan.
So SDF, or the Super Dimension Fortress, also known as freeshell.org, is a non-profit public access Unix shell provider on the internet. It has been in continual operation since 1987 as a non-profit social club. The name is actually derived from a Japanese anime series, the Super Dimension Fortress Macross. The original SDF server was a BBS for anime fans back in the day. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. From its BBS roots, which have been well documented as part of BBS, the documentary, which is, if you were around back then or were interested in BBSs at all, I highly recommend that documentary. Is very good. A little,
I need to go look at
little strong on the nostalgia, though. You're going to want to go and recreate the 90s if you watch the documentary.
Go play Legend of the Red Dragon?
Or Trade Wars and Baron Realms Elite.
Yeah.
I was never much for the role playing.
It's been a long time since I've heard those names.
Yes. I still played Trade Wars via Telnet for years after BBSs were long gone.
Oh man.
Yeah.
So I remember the very first time we got on the internet, all we wanted to do was play MUDs with somebody. We had gotten a book or something, and there was like some free Star Wars MUDs you could play, and like that was like a text-based adventure with a bunch of other people. It was amazing. Yeah. Oh, man. Getting some member berries there for the South Park fans. Yep. Anyway, go ahead, Alan.
So a public access Unix system was a lot of people's first access to a Unix shell, right? Back in the 90s, virtual machines were rare. Like VMware Workstation cost hundreds of dollars, and QEMU didn't really exist yet, and VirtualBox didn't exist yet. So, and most people didn't have enough RAM to try to run 2 operating systems at once, let alone more like we do now. And so, you're only people didn't really have more than one computer either. And so running Unix at home was quite difficult, honestly, because, you didn't want to give up your machine that you needed to do your schoolwork or whatever, or, it wasn't just your computer. You had to share with your brothers and sisters or whatever, and your parents. Meant that you couldn't just go install Unix on it. And so being able to SSH or Telnet into a real Unix computer somewhere and play with stuff and maybe, compile stuff or whatever was really an interesting thing back then. It was an important thing. That's actually how I got my start with Unix. Eventually moving on beyond that and paying for shell accounts on bigger servers so that I'd have more resources to work with and be allowed to leave things running when I logged out and so on. And then eventually even transition from that to actually getting my own server and renting out shells to other people for hosting like IRC servers and channel bots and so on. But it says here, on June 16th in 1987, Ted Ullman, whose handle is Charmin, connected his Apple IIe's 300 baud modem to the phone line his mother had gotten him for his birthday. He then published the number the night before on a bunch of BBSs around Dallas, Fort Worth, and Texas. And he hoped that he basically sat back and waited for the first person to call into his BBS. All right, he was running a copy of Magic Micro BBS, which was written in AppleSoft Basic. And he named his BBS SDF-1 after his favorite Japanese anime cartoon, Robotech Macross or whatever. He hoped that, to draw users that would be interested in anime or industrial music and some of the Church of the Subgenius.
I don't even know what
I don't even know what that is.
Okay.
Listening to that story, it was pretty interesting because although I started later than that, because I was like 2 when he started this, I started kind of the same way, right? I got, my neighbor kind of introduced me to this concept of BBSs, so I got my modem on my computer hooked up and dialed up and started having fun with it, and then that ended up tying up the phone line a little too much. So for my birthday, my parents got me a dedicated phone line for calling out to BBSs. But then I managed to talk them into letting me leave my computer on overnight and set up a BBS on it and started letting people dial in to my BBS. And, I was running a Renegade BBS software for MS-DOS back then. And I actually credit that early experience with actually discovering my passion with systems administration and setting up and managing things, right? Being the administrator of this BBS when I was like 12 was kind of a big thing for me.
That was pretty impressive, right? You're calling all your friends on the phone, like, dial into my BBS.
Yeah.
I did that. Yep. One of my friends ran one on his Apple, and I ran one on my Windows 95 box, I think is what it was at the time.
Yep. I even had a bunch of my friends actually dialing in order to play one of the text-based games. We were playing, I think it was Falcon's Honor. It was like Baron Realms Elite, but set in a more medieval kind of setup.
Sure.
Anyway, it was quite a bit of fun. We had, I even had a couple of friends who had just come over to my house after school to play their turns on my machine because they couldn't dial in from home or whatever. Anyway, it says, slowly SDF was grown over all these years. It's been 30 years now. Never forgetting its past, and unlike many sites on the internet, we actually have a past. Some people today may come here and see us as outdated and retro, but if you get involved, you'll see it's still quite alive and with new ideas and a platform for opportunity and many new things. The machines are often refreshed, the quotas are gone, the disk space is expanding, as are the features and user-driven features and so on. And our cabinets have plenty of space and expansion in the US and in Europe, where they're hosted in Germany. So he says, we'd all think about ways you'd like to celebrate SDF's 30th anniversary and join us on the B-board to discuss what you would like to do. I realize many of you have likely moved on yourselves, but I just wanted to know that we're still here and we'll keep doing new and exciting things with the Foundation in the Unix shell.
Nice.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about freeshell.org in probably 15 years.
It's been a while. Yeah.
It was, I think, the last time I was playing with it.
I'd almost have to go look just to see what it is now. Like, what are the new features and services that have evolved out of that?
Yeah, because, it would be about 15 years ago when I started selling shell accounts. So all of a sudden I had my own servers, so I didn't need anybody else's. But for a long time, it was the only way I had access to Unix. And then, it was after SDF, but the first shell account I paid for is how I got introduced to FreeBSD.
So basically, virtual machines killed the free shell type services in many ways.
Not even necessarily that. Back when I did the shells, we could, they were between $5 and $15. But now nobody's going to pay that for a shell account because for $5 you can rent a virtual machine from DigitalOcean. But even before that,
that's true.
For only a couple more dollars, you could usually rent a low-end server. But now, with the VMs and VPSs, why would you pay me $5 for a shell account when you could pay $5 and have root on a machine with, back in the day, 512 megs of RAM that you get in that DigitalOcean droplet was all we had on a server that we were renting accounts out to 100 different people.
It's unheard of. World's changed. Okay, well, let's move on here. Our next story, getting Minecraft to run on NetBSD. So one of the things that doesn't come up often on BSD Now is gaming. So I realize most of us are server folks, or maybe you don't play games, the kind of person who thinks that the PC is for work and you use your fancy schmancy PS4 and get off my lawn, you kids. There's a few of us out there like that, right? But today I thought it would be fun to highlight this post over at Reddit that's talking about running Minecraft on NetBSD. Now, I realize this may not be news to some of you, but perhaps it is to others. For the record, my kids have been playing Minecraft on PCBSD and TrueOS for years. It's the primary reason they're booted into that more often than say Windows, for example. Funny story behind that, I just got sick of all the third-party mods, which more often than not came helpfully bundled with viruses and malware. I think I reloaded my son's desktop 3 times, and that was enough. I was like, nope, we're running BSD. Minecraft. Yeah, I'm like, we're running BSD now. And guess what? We've never had a virus or malware since, which is fantastic. But on NetBSD, so if you're a NetBSD fan, first of all, the process looks a little bit different than on FreeBSD. So first up, you'll need to enable Linux emulation and install Oracle's JRE, not the OpenJDK. That path's going to lead to sadness here, so don't do that. But the guide walks us through the process of fetching the required Linux runtime packages, extracting those, and then enabling some bits such as procfs, which you'll need to run Linux binaries on NetBSD. But once that's done, this will actually take you like 5 minutes. Minecraft is really only a simple Oracle 8-JRE path to your Minecraft.jar file, command away from starting up, and you'll be crafting in no time. Which, by the way, does anyone even play survival anymore? I don't think I've ever seen my kids play survival. They're always playing these custom servers, and I can't keep up. I don't play Minecraft.
Yeah, so. I haven't played in a long time, but I always played, creative or whatever it was called.
Yeah, they're playing all these Harry Potter servers and like all these fancy things that they've built like this entire world in, right? And I don't get it. When I was a kid, like you played a game to beat it, the challenge, and then you were done, you moved on. But
yeah,
anyway.
Because it's a NetBSD article, of course it mentions the steps you might have to do to try to get it to work on Spark 64.
Of course, it does do that. It dangles that little carrot at the end, like this would probably work on Spark 64.
Yeah, because you could have Oracle.
If anyone tries that,
yeah.
I need to see a picture tweeted of that. By the way, Minecraft running on the Spark 64.
Yes, that would. It's like Minecraft running on computers that stopped being produced long before Minecraft existed.
Yes, that would be funny to see. Anywho, maybe some of you have that much free time. I don't, so have fun with that. Okay, so we got some Beastie Bits to get to. We got feedbacks and questions, so we're going to go ahead and get started with that. So starting with the Beastie Bits, we have Unix on the Computer Chronicles, and it looks like a YouTube video here.
So the Computer Chronicles was a show, I think, on PBS in the mid-'80s. So this particular episode is from 1985. And they're introducing people to the concept of Unix and how it's different from the other operating systems you can use at the time. And it's like, yes, the important thing is that, you can run it on different types of computer. Because back then, now we don't really have that many different types of computers, right? We have like the x86 and Spark 64, which is kind of old, and like ARM and maybe MIPS. But back then, like every manufacturer's computer was a completely different architecture.
Ton of competing standards at the time.
Well, they weren't even standards yet. Like manufacturers often would change between revisions of their model. And so they shipped their operating system with it, and that was the only option you had. And then along comes Unix with this idea of, hey, we can make something we can port to all these different architectures, and you won't have to rewrite all your programs in a different programming language or to a different instruction set. Everything will just use the C runtime library, and everything will be great.
Right? It's all wonderful. That's definitely a cool blast from the past.
But what's interesting is, some of the deficiencies, I would say, of Unix are highlighted in 1985. And it's like, we've had 30-something years and we haven't found a way around that one yet.
Somebody make that work.
Yeah.
Come on. How long has that ticket been open somewhere?
It's like, it needs to be more user-friendly.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's fun to watch these old episodes of the Computer Chronicles. A lot of I think the entire collection of them is up on archive.org because they're public domain now, I think. But, if you're interested in computer history or just laughing at old things, it's definitely worth a watch.
Nice. Okay, well, next up we have a tweet here. Adrian Chad has posted talking about the Atheros AR9380s and later. They've managed to get the drivers working so that maximum UDP TX goes from 250 megabits to 355 megabits.
Yep. So I think that's some improvements to the locking and general cleanup of the code. And now you get an extra 100 megabits of Wi-Fi speed.
That's fantastic. Yeah, nobody's going to complain about that.
Nope.
Okay, so what's this next one here? We have a capsicum trace route.
Yes. So
So you're listed as a reviewer,
Yes.
so tell me what's going
So
on.
this is the traceroute tool, right? Everybody's familiar with that.
Yep.
But on FreeBSD, we have a review here to switch it over to using Capsicum, so it'll actually run sandboxed. So
Sure.
in general, that was not that hard. But then you have the problem of once you're in the sandbox, you can't make connections out in order to do DNS lookups to
Correct.
check each hop, and you can't possibly do those ahead of time because you don't know what the IP addresses are yet. So to deal with this, Capsicum has a lightweight library called Casper, which provides certain services. So this is an example of actually using the system.dns service to basically allow doing DNS lookups from inside the sandbox by actually
They have like a really safe implementation.
yeah.
of
So
DNS
basically,
lookups that essentially
you ask Casper to do the lookup on your behalf, and before you
Okay,
entered the
I gotcha.
sandbox, you created the Casper so that it's allowed out to do that.
Well, that makes sense. Yeah, I'm just looking at the code here. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So the change is actually quite minimal. It's just in the case of if we have Casper, then we do the
I see just changing
DNS
some
lookup.
includes and
Yeah.
defining some new things.
Yeah, there's the setup of it, but then down here it's just that if def have Casper, then cap get host by name. Otherwise, do regular get host by name.
I'm only seeing like maybe 50 new lines of code.
Yeah, and most of that's just
of
the
actual like real code.
yeah, most of that's just the boilerplate to set up the Capsicum
Yeah.
sandbox. And if you're looking at it, most of it is actually like the actual changes to the DNS lookups is like 3 lines. Just adding an if you have the
Yeah.
Casper DNS
Just
thing.
change what you're calling.
Yeah.
So it's just cap get host by name versus just get host by name.
Yes.
Very nice.
What I'm
And
looking
pass
forward
on-
to is when Casper gets the feature to allow you to iterate over a large number of files. So
yeah.
like we've been looking at capsicumizing things like gzip, but the problem with gzip is you could give it a list of files, like 100 files. And the normal way you do it with Capsicum is you would open the files, then enter the sandbox, and then once you're in the sandbox, you can't open any more files.
Sure.
So this prevents an attacker from being able to do something bad. But you don't necessarily want to open hundreds and hundreds of files at once before you need them.
True.
Whereas what gzip normally does is open them one at a time. So what the Casper file system service will allow it to happen is you give it the giant list and then be like, give me the first 10 and then work on them and the next 10, to be slightly more efficient than doing them one at a time. But instead of giving you the file names or whatever, it will give you the file descriptors that are open and allow you to securely
So
have access to those.
you precede it with your list ahead of time. Like these are the things I'm going to be requesting at some point
Yeah.
during the operation.
And then be like, but I don't want to open more than 10 at a time because I don't want to use up all the file descriptors or whatever.
Oh, that's cool. That's really neat.
So yeah, anyway, there's just interesting step to see traceroute get capsicumized.
All right, nice. Okay, so before we go to our feedback and questions, we need to do our last sponsor here. So, of course, the website for that is Tarsnap, and we're actually going to have a little bit about this for the questions and answers. Actually, I'm going to move that up to the first question because it's going to relate really well, and it'll segue. Let me move that over. But anyway, Tarsnap, website for that, tarsnap.com/BSD Now. You'll want to go there, get signed up right away, start doing your backups safely and securely. So we've been telling you for, gosh, what was it, 3.5 years now? It's been a while. Like we've been doing this a while, but Tarsnap still just keeps on trucking, man. Still open source. You can go check it out, verify, have your company or your engineers audit the code if you don't believe or trust Colin, which he's a really nice guy. I'll test to that. But either way, you don't want to have to trust Colin. And he's
Colin
paranoid
doesn't
himself.
want you to have to trust him either. In fact, if you go
Colin
over to
doesn't trust Colin.
Yes. If you go to his blog, it's like he's got an article about why you shouldn't trust him.
That's right. And that's what you want to hear in your backup provider, right? He doesn't want access to your files and doesn't want to care, and doesn't, want to get subject to people trying to break his kneecaps to give him the key to access your files. So he designed Tarsnap in such a way that that's not possible. You own the key You control it 100%. So if that key goes away, then you'll be in good shape. Your data in the cloud is pretty much rendered meaningless. So definitely want to check it out today. Download the client. Runs on just about everything under the sun, and we'll get to that here in just a moment on our first feedback question.
You can pay with Stripe, Bitcoins, or PayPal.
That's right.
So Stripe is a credit card processor. So you can pay with credit card, Bitcoin, or PayPal.
And you'll be shocked how cheap it is. Like put that $20 in, and it'll just last a long time. Especially if you're doing duplicatable data, like it only backs up the bits that have changed. So yes. I know I've been watching my count every night.
Diff algorithm for actually figuring out what blocks have changed and what haven't.
That's right. So definitely check it out today. Anything else you want to add on that one, Alan?
No, that's it for that one.
All right. Actually, good thing Domino's just reminded me. I almost forgot. Knoxbug meeting. Thank you for reminding me. I had completely slipped my mind to put that in the notes. But we have an upcoming meeting here. Let's see here. It's Monday the 30th. So next Monday, we're having a pizza pie party, which you can guess, though. Pi is a reference there. But they're going to be doing a Raspberry Pi install fest. So they're asking people to bring Raspberry Pis, SD cards, keyboard, monitor, mouse, and then show up. And we're going to be loading things and doing stuff. So I actually have a few of those hanging around the office and house here. I might have to bring one. And I have a Minnow board I'm in meeting to play with, too. Mm-hmm. Hopefully, you won't kick me out if I show up with a Minnow board, not a Pi. But bring small embedded devices. It will be fun.
I need to break out my NVIDIA TK1 someday, too.
See, so I have some Raspberry Pi 3s I need to get TrueOS Pico images rolled for. So I need to play with that. And then the Minnow board, same thing. I need to get that working. So definitely check it out, and I'll make sure the link ends up in the show notes. Thank you for reminding me. I appreciate it.
Alrighty.
Okay, so Tarsnap, though, our first question this week comes from Jason, and this kind of fits good with our previous sponsor. But hello, Colin and the BSD Now team. He says, while not pure BSD, Windows 10 users can now Tarsnap natively in Windows without having to install Cygwin. I've included some backup and restore snips below to show you that it works as intended. He said, as the Windows drives are exposed under MNT, you can now back up your Windows directories without any hassle. And he provides the simple steps. You set Windows 10 into developer mode, enable the Windows subsystems for Linux, which is in beta, go through the steps to get it working, before all the necessary updates with apt-get. Sorry.
This explains why Colin was suddenly spending a bunch of effort getting it to be an official Debian package.
That's probably why. Apt-get. Anyway, follow the Tarsnap instructions for Ubuntu and Debian and install the necessary tools and compile and install. And then you set up your key and start backing up. As you can see, it's super simple. He said, that's about it. Ping me if you have any questions. See you at BSDCan later this year. Well, that's really cool, Jason. That is definitely, there's a little bit more setup involved getting it started, but definitely nice not to have to use Cygwin.
Just apt-get Tarsnap.
Well, you got to put Windows into developer mode and then do some other. He just says, go through the steps to get it working. I'm not sure what those steps are after you enable it. But anyway, that is pretty neat, though, kind of running that natively there. Okay, so let's see here. Now I'm all out of order. Let's see. Mike was the next one here. Chris, thanks for the complete answer to my OpenRC migration woes. He said, I'm putting together a pull request as I write this. And I think you already sent it in and I already merged it. So thank you for doing that. Regarding the question somebody had about DigitalOcean droplets setting up SSH keys for Virgin instances, there is a way to set this up using user data, which is visible during the create droplet phase. And he provides us some links here. They have a tutorial on how you can do your initial server setup using Cloud Config. He said, a long time ago, I used this for things such as the authorized keys file and host-based authentication through a similar API in AWS. He said it's actually really cool. So
yeah, I guess you definitely could use the OpenSSH tools to generate the key and feed it into the DigitalOcean droplet when it starts up, so that on first boot it doesn't generate a key, it uses the key you've assigned it, so you already know the public half of that.
Nice. Hey, somebody in chat just posted, Colin wrote me a few days ago, there's more awesomeness coming soon. I've been working on making FreeBSD's NFS client play nicely with Amazon's Elastic file system.
Yeah, I've been watching him do that for a while. Hopefully he can get that working.
Stuff.
Yeah, Colin's been doing a good job of keeping all the Amazon features going on FreeBSD.
Very cool. Okay, so you want to read the next one here? It was Anonymous talking about old machines.
Yes, so Anonymous writes in, he says, hey guys, I've been loving your show since I discovered it a few months back. Keep up the great work. My first experience with BSD was OpenBSD on a SPARC 64.
Yay!
I have always loved vintage and obscure machines. I don't know why some people do.
I I'm about new and shiny, man. The old,
Yeah.
my wife hates it when I do this. I'm always throwing old things away.
Right.
Like I'm done with that. I'm done with that. Don't want it
Yep.
in my house. Chuck it, right? But some people
I don't know.
love
I've
their old
noticed
thing.
once open source developers get to a certain age, all of a sudden they want old computers.
It's the member berries. That's what it is.
Probably. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, he says, I wonder if you might give some pointers about retiring old machines. If you unplug from the web and you like your Unix system, what would keep you from using it in a no upgrade, no install workstation retro gamer setup? I think my biggest thing is I probably would want to keep installing things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's always a new game I want to play or something, right?
He's like, so if you sneakernet files via USB to other systems, how big a deal is file corruption or compatibility issues or security? If you really wanted to run an old version of FreeBSD, you can. I'm just not entirely sure why you would want to.
Some people just like their old thing.
Yeah,
what can I say?
UFS is pretty stable. I wouldn't really be worried about file corruption. Eventually, your big threat there is the hardware giving out. But if you use a version of BSD that's not sold, it doesn't have Gmirror, then you're probably okay. You just mirror the hard drives. But yeah, that's the biggest problem with old hardware is that it dies.
Yeah. And then finding replacement parts or the know-how to fix it yourself is like, who has time for that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I know a bunch of people that seem to somehow make time for it. It's why are we spending effort keeping it working on
It's a
Spark
hobby.
64? That same effort could be put somewhere else.
It's going to be this generation's version of like folks who like keeping old classic cards running.
Yep.
Like you're going to be going to, I'll be in my 60s going to somebody's house and be like, let me show you my basement. And then they'll have the old Spark 64 set up. Like that's his lifelong ambition is to keep the Spark 64s running. The flame is still lit.
Yes.
Anyway. Okay, we should move on here. So we have Matt. Alan and Chris, when I set up my new FreeBSD 10.3 server, I decided to use jails to keep processes segregated for security as well as being able to easily start and stop multiple processes that are all part of the same overall service. I used IOCage to make the jail configuration and management easier, but I think I went about things the wrong way for my needs. At this point, I don't need different versions of FreeBSD in any of my jails. I'd like to make it as easy as possible to keep the host system and the jails up to date, both the base system and the packages. I don't fully understand how I should configure the jails when I first set them up, so I created them all with the default thick type. This seems to mean they all have their own base file system, port tree, etc. So they all have redundant files, which should be able to be shared between jails. I currently have to update the base system in each individually, which is a pain. After reading through the IOCage docs, it lists multiple jail types, but I'm confused about how my configuration should be in order to accomplish what I'm after. Do I need a single base jail and several thin jail clones to do this? Does this accomplish my goal of only needing to update the FreeBSD base once and for all? Any light you could shed on this would be helpful. So yes and no. IOCage has a template system, so first of all, you got to make sure you're not confusing the terminologies. Just because you download 11.0 and it clones a jail off that doesn't mean that you can just upgrade the parent, right? You actually do have to use the base jail thin provision where it actually does all the nullfs mounts to do that.
So with the base jail setup, what you have is one file system that contains the base system, and that's read-only mounted into each of the other jails. Whereas with a clone, it's a copy of the base system's data set, but each one is unique. So they don't take up the extra space, but once you upgrade, they will actually all take up that space because the blocks will be different. So the clones allow you to, it's an exact copy that doesn't take extra space, only takes space for the changes, but upgrades will eventually mean that you're not saving any space. Whereas with the base jail, it means you upgrade the base jail once and it upgrades everything else because they're just mounting the same thing via nullfs. So there are basically three different kinds. You have the thick jail where it's a completely separate file system. Your clone, which is a copy on write version of a thick jail, and then a base jail, which is where you have a single base image and your jails are read-only mounting that.
Sure.
So that one sounds like what you want if you want to be able to upgrade, although it doesn't really affect your packages. Although if you're using FreeBSD upstream packages, there's not much way around having to do package upgrade in each jail, but it's not that hard to do.
Well, I was going to say, so on 12 with TrueOS, I've gone the other route now, right? I don't do the base jail nullfs stuff. I just do full jails. But since the package is a part of base, I already got to run package upgrade once in the jail anyway to do the packages. So it upgrades the base for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just does it at the same time, right? So it's no different than just doing the package upgrade, except it also happens to be upgrading base at the same time, and I'm not having to fiddle with FreeBSD update in a jail, which is not fun.
Yeah.
So, just to throw that out there, package base makes this a heck of a lot easier, and I think will solve a lot of people's dilemma with exactly this circumstance.
Yeah. I would say the same thing. I'm basically getting away from base jails. The base system FreeBSD on ZFS with compression is like 250 megabytes. I'm not hurting for space that bad.
Yeah, it's not that big a deal, right? This space is cheap now.
Yeah.
Okay, and one more jail-related question. What's the best way to configure the networking for this jail system? I've currently got all the jails assigned to aliases on the host physical IGP0 interface. He said, should I use VNet and NAT to a loopback interface, something else, etc.? Don't use VNet if you don't need it. I mean, if aliases work and are working fine, then
that's what I've always done. I've always stuck with aliases either on an internal interface with your regular like 192.168 type IP address, and then they go out via the NAT router somewhere else, or on servers. In particular, usually I have public IP addresses that I want in the jail if I'm going to run a service in them. Although sometimes, yes, I will do the loopback or something with NAT if I need more jails than I have IPs, and I don't necessarily want them directly exposed to the internet. But usually the point of my jail is to contain a service that's going to be exposed to the internet. So I'm usually giving them aliases of real IP addresses on my IGB type interface.
So I've been working with Brandon, and one of the things I want IOCage to do at some point is for its plugin system, which is essentially just jails plus packages and some metadata. I wanted to have a way where it uses VNet, and it does a little bit more of a Docker-like thing, where in the plugin you say, okay, this is a Plex Media Server plugin. The only port I care about is port 8080, we'll say, for example, right? And then it internally will set up the NAT and set up the private IP address and forward it off the parent's public address.
For that one, you wouldn't really need to use VNet, right?
We wouldn't have to, but in this case, we'd still want it for a Plex Media Server because of the multicast and stuff. But that's something I'd like to get to at some point. So even the address for a plugin anyway is irrelevant, right? It just auto-assigns it and says, okay, this is the port, and it forwards that port from the host system, done.
Yeah.
Right. So
it'd be nice to get that type of stuff user-friendly like that.
Yeah, I want to make that as user-friendly as possible. So literally it's like plug and install, and then boom, if I connect to my system's IP address on port 8080, I see Plex, right? No network config at all. But anyway, stay tuned for that coming in the future. That's something I think we're going to work on. Okay, so you want to read the last one here about rclone?
Sure. So Jalti writes in.
Jalti, yeah, sorry.
Hey guys, love the show. I've set up a FreeNAS server at home, and I would like to have an easy way of doing an offsite backup using rclone. I'm not familiar with this software, but doing it to a cloud server. I'm mainly using the GUI on the FreeNAS machine and also on pfSense, and I'm having a little difficulty setting this application up on my FreeNAS server. So it's a command line program to sync files to something like Google Drive or
AWS, that kind of stuff.
Dropbox, something like that.
Yes. So I don't remember if we include the utility on the command line. If we do, great. It should just be a matter of finding a tutorial on how to use it and then scripting it or setting it up to do whatever it is you're trying to do. If it's not included on the base, you'll probably want to just go ahead and create a jail on FreeNAS and then package install rclone that way. So at least you get it. And then that jail, you can, via the GUI, you can go in and do the nullfs mounts of the things you're going to want to back up. Expose that into the jail. Then you can set up a cron job in the jail, which runs rclone and dumps them, like you said, to Dropbox or S3 or whatever bucket you're pouring the bits into.
Yep. It's definitely in the ports tree. I see it here.
Oh yeah, it's definitely important. I just didn't know if it's included in FreeNAS, which actually, you know what?
I don't know that it.
I'm at work. I could tell you really quick. Okay. 2 seconds. We'll see.
It seems like an odd thing to actually decide to include, but maybe not.
Well, we include a ton of little utilities like this in FreeNAS. You'd actually be surprised how many of them there are, just because people have neat cases where they want to do things like this.
Yeah, making that easier it makes sense. It's just not something I would have thought of.
Okay, waiting for it.
This is why I'm not in charge of FreeNAS, and you are.
Right. Yeah, we added some stuff like Command Watcher recently. I mean, there's been a lot of little things we've added. Actually, my system's down. I guess one of the QA people is working on it. Anyway, I'll double check, but I think it might already be in the base. And again, if not, throw it in a jail, package install, rclone, done. And you should be set and good to go. Okay, well, I guess that means it's time to wrap up the show for the week. So as we close it out, of course, we want to remind you to send everything into feedback@bsdnow.tv. So that's questions, comments. If you have show ideas or topics or any stories, of course, that you've seen, send that over to feedback@bsdnow.tv. Sometimes we see them, like I read Reddit a lot, and I'll see cool tech stories there. But there's a lot of things that don't make it there, and then, I can't watch everything, and nor can Alan. So please keep sending those into feedback@bsdnow.tv, and we'll make sure it ends up in a future episode. So, of course, thank you for being with us this week, and we'll be back same time next week.